Hello everyone, my name is Maria Kefa and I'm a volunteer for FastTIMES magazine. Today we are going to be interviewing Forrest, owner of the Enhanced Scanning, a utility locating and concrete scanning GPR service provider in Southern California, and president of the GPR Consortium, a non-profit international trade association for GPR professionals that is launching soon. Dear Forrest, thank you very much for being here. Before we start,
my pleasure. Thank you.
Before we start, can you explain us about the GPR Consortium? It sounds very interesting.
Yeah, the GPR Consortium, it's a practical trade association. The entire purpose of the trade association is to support GPR professionals who are working in the field to try to help them to be better purveyors of their trade tomorrow than they were today. The website is, we're still working on the website. We're hoping to launch it here very soon, and the website is going to have very practical things on it, like a learning center where there are going to be articles to be able to go over to learn more about perhaps different aspects of GPR than maybe you learned in school or than you've learned on your from your employer. It'll have a forum where you can interact with other GPR professionals internationally. There are just going to be a few different aspects to it that are going to be very, like I said, try to be very practical, things that are going to be able to help you to understand GPR a little bit better today, a little bit better for tomorrow than maybe you understood it today.
Nice.
But anyway, it's just a collection of international GPR professionals and all trying to support each other. GPR is a really interesting technology, but there are so many uses for it, so many applications for it, that there are very few who are true masters of every aspect of GPR. Most of us are very good at one little niche or another, and every once in a while we'll broaden out into some other aspect of GPR applications. But as I've gotten to know more and more GPR professionals around the world, it seems like we could all benefit from the facilitating of better communication between all of us. That's what the GPR Consortium is designed to do.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to tell us about yourself and your background in geophysics.
Sure. I didn't start studying geophysics in the university that I attended. I have a background in geology in my home, where my mom was a geologist. She worked in the oil and gas industry and got me interested in earth sciences very young. And then through work, I was approached by a company that hired me to start doing GPR services for their company in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the United States. So I learned GPR just on the job there, and found that I enjoyed it very much. Got trained through the company, and then just found that since I liked it so much, I started training myself a little bit more on deeper aspects of ground penetrating radar, as well as taking soil conductivity measurements and other near surface geophysics. Found that it was really interesting. It was pretty cool, and just kind of started developing myself more into that. And eventually I started my own company doing the same near surface geophysics, except some people would call it near surface geophysics, and that's fine. I am mostly doing ground penetrating radar services that are in the near surface, so we could call them near surface geophysics, but I don't have a geophysics firm per se, a geophysics company. I have a GPR services company.
Okay.
But that's kind of what moves through. Yeah.
Okay. What type of technical work do you do in your current position?
Well, my current position is changing a little bit, as I'm the as I'm the owner of the company, I have employees whom I've started hiring to do more of the field work. I still do some field work on occasion, but it's interesting as a business owner, and any small business owner can tell you this, that the things that make you a successful business owner often have very little or nothing to do with your trade. A plumber or an electrician, an excellent plumber, may not do any plumbing to have an excellent plumbing company, because he's got to be able to do the books. He has to be able to do the invoicing. He has to be able to find customers and sell work. And that's kind of where I am right now. So I do a lot of that office work to keep the company running, but I also have a lot of interest in finding out what's new and up and coming in the industry. So I'm constantly talking to friends around the world. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm reading articles. I have to stay up to date on what is about to happen, or what's not even happening in my industry, but what's happening in a parallel industry that I think could be applied to my company's work, just so that I can kind of stay ahead of that curve and stay on the cutting edge, at least. Just figuring out if there are other geophysical techniques that are coming up for which we could be qualified to offer more services to our customers. That's a lot of what I do right now.
Okay, very good. I would like you to mention the major steps on your career path. What were the crucial decisions you had to take in order to reach your goals?
Probably the most important step that I've taken in my career path was to not be afraid to approach something that I did not know how to do, and challenge myself to try to learn how to do it. If I could, my philosophy is that I'm not a dummy. I don't have a degree in geophysics, a degree in geology, or anything like that, but I'm also not an idiot. If somebody else can figure out how to do this particular thing, then I believe that I can figure out how to do it. There are limits to that. In fact, there are many things that I will not do in my company because I don't have that degree in geophysics or the degree in geology. There are things that a geophysicist should do that I should not do, and I will readily admit that, and I will very happily, if I get a call for that type of work, I will very happily refer them over to, hey, you should talk to a licensed geophysicist, or hey, you know what? You really need to talk to a geologist. I don't do that type of thing. And so understanding where my boundaries are, knowing that, okay, I'm within this box. I'm not a geophysicist. I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm staying within the box of the things that I can do, but understanding that I set the boundaries for that box. If I wanted to get a degree in geophysics, I can get that degree in geophysics. And just not being afraid of making that box bigger and bigger and bigger. Probably the most important thing that I've done in my career.
Okay. Now I want you to describe your daily work routine. What part is the most fascinating for you?
The most important for me is the way that I start my day, just making sure that I start my day early and I start my day with my normal, with a good routine. That's probably what's most important. What's the most fascinating is when I come across some new technology, a new technique, something's new in the industry. I call a friend who I know, or I suspect has some experience with this new technology or technique, and have a conversation with him or her, and start figuring out if it's something that we could use in our company. That's really fascinating. It's really fun to find something new and collaborate with someone else on, hey, how are you making this work? I wonder if that could work here in Southern California. I like that. It's fun.
Oh, okay. Do you believe that near-surface geophysics is viable for a geologist, and why?
Oh yeah. Near near surface geophysics, you can be, gosh, with near surface geophysics, you're doing all sorts of stuff. You can be, here in Southern California, using seismicity to, trace out fault lines. And in Southern California, we have lots of faults. And when you're laying an oil and gas line, I don't do this, but I suspect that if you were laying a fuel oil line, or some sort of petroleum line, you don't want to be able to know where those faults were and how you were crossing a fault and with that line, and that would be very important information. If you had a landfill, we have a landfill that's about 10-15 miles up the road, and that landfill, they need to very well understand what's happening in the near surface stratigraphically, to as they expand that landfill out, so they don't create an environmental disaster as if they go and expand that into some soils, into some stratigraphy that they shouldn't be encroaching onto. Environmentally, there are just 1,000 applications for understanding how to use how to do soil conductivity measurements, how to use ground penetrating radar. Using seismicity. There are so many ways that a geologist could use these near surface geophysics, these the technologies available today to help a company, or to help a governmental body to make good decisions. So I think it's a really cool industry. It's a really cool way to make a living.
I totally agree. And at the end of our conversation, could you point out some important lessons that you learned from your work experience with geophysics?
So I can speak to my experience, and that's all I can really speak to. My experience has been in the private sector, in working with customers who want me to help them find pipes underground, or help them to find buried foundations, or help them to find underground storage tanks, or monitoring wells, help them find things underground, man-made things. And so I can speak to that. Having good, clear communication with your customer, managing their expectations, helping them to understand that while these tools that we use, ground penetrating radar, soil conductivity meters, electromagnetic induction tools, these are all really amazing, wonderful tools that do a lot, but they all have their limitations too. They're complementary. They'll have a strength here while another has a weakness there. And so understanding how to use those tools in a way that complement each other, and then being able to explain that, how and why you're using these tools to your customer, and explaining to your customer that I'm taking these steps, but I cannot guarantee anything that I'm going to be finding here. This just gives you a lot more information than you had before. And just managing their expectations, that's probably one of the most important things that in my industry that I can do in the field, is make sure that my customer understands that this isn't Superman X-ray vision that I'm using, that I can just see everything underground. I can see a lot of things. And the more I understand the technology, the theory behind my tools, the better I can help my customer. But there are a lot of things, a lot of limitations to any non-destructive testing that we do for finding things underground. Just helping the customer manage those expectations. That's big.
Okay. So excellent. Thank you very much for joining us today. This has
Yeah.
been an interview with Forrest Sim, and I hope you enjoyed it. Uh, so thank you again, and see you soon.